Welcome in, whiskey freaks, to the Blind Tasting Podcast, your number one attitudinal bourbon destination. I'm extremely glad to have you guys back. And I want to say thanks to all of you who have followed me on Facebook and Instagram, and a special thanks to those dedicated whiskey freaks who have subscribed on YouTube and Apple, Spotify, iHeart. You know all the places to find awesome content. Big thanks to all of you. Well, enough ass kissing. Let's get after it, kids. So here's the deal. Today I get to review I.W. Harper Cabernet Cask Reserve. It's a finished whiskey, and I'm always a little skeptical of jimmying around with whiskey through special barrel staves or secret aging processes or casting magic spells or, in this case, cask finishing. So I'm intrigued to see what this one is all about. And remember, when I review stuff, it's impartial. I'm going to be truthful, I'm going to be factual, and I'm going to get straight to the point. Look, nobody gave me this whiskey. I bought it. I've got no connection to the big distilleries, where they send you something for free and you review it in their favor and say, middle of the road things about it, even though it's crap. That's not fair to you guys. I've been there. You watch somebody on the YouTubes or you listen to their flashy podcast where they boast about who they rubbed elbows with that weekend, and then they give a decent review to absolute garbage. The problem is, you don't find out it's garbage until after you've wasted your money. Those guys are not on this podcast. So, just a bit of background on I.W. Harper. A bit, and I'm not going to go nuts on a super long history lesson today, but there is a lengthy history to I.W. Harper, and I'll try to distill it down for you. So the story goes that in 1848, Isaac Wolf Bernheim came from Germany to America with $4 in his pocket and a dream. He brought his brother over shortly thereafter, and along with a silent partner, they started Bernheim Brothers Liquor in 1872 in Paducah, Kentucky. They moved the operation to Louisville, and the brothers bought the Pleasure Ridge Park Distillery in Louisville, and it began operating as the Bernheim Distillery. Hang with me on this one. There's going to be a lot of Bernheim distilleries we talk about. So they survived a costly fire, and it destroyed their bonded warehouse in 1896, but they opened a new distillery property in Louisville the next year. At some point, they decided to create a luxury brand of whiskey called I.W. Harper. There's really no mention as to why it wasn't called Bernheim, but I guess possibly for marketing purposes, or I don't know. They just used Harper. There's a fun fact about the Bernheim distillery. It was one of only 10 distilleries that were allowed to keep making bourbon during Prohibition for medicinal purposes. And so Bernheim, unlike many others, survived Prohibition quite well. As such, Isaac Bernheim eventually sold the distillery to Schenley Distilling in 1937, and that's shortly after Prohibition. Okay, so fast forward 50 years or so. I'm almost done, kids. Stay with me. In 1992, United Distillers, owned by Guinness, opened a large distilling operation they called Bernheim Distillery in Louisville. Now, at the time, United owned the I.W. Harper brand, but the problem was they had lowered the quality of the bourbon in the United States. They were really more focused on Asia, Europe, and most especially Japan. And we all know how much Japan loves bourbon whiskey. So the brand became very popular there. Eventually, they just stopped selling I.W. Harper in the U.S. completely. In 1997, Guinness merged with Grand Metropolitan, and they formed Diageo, which still owns the I.W. Harper brand to this day. They don't own the Bernheim Distillery in Louisville. As we know, Heaven Hill bought that back in 99 after they had that crazy fire from the lightning strike back in, I think it was November of 96. So Diageo decided to bring I.W. Harper back to the United States in 2015. And so they offered an 82 proof version bourbon whiskey and a 15-year offering. So here's the good news for us today. Diageo decided to jump into the finishing craze with I.W. Harper in 2022 by creating Cabernet Cask Reserve, and that's what we'll be drinking today. Now, Harper was known as the hospitality bourbon. And to fit that image, they came up with something called the bowing man. It was a guy on the label wearing a coat with tails, holding a cane, and tipping a top hat. Most historians believe this was probably inspired and kind of copied off of Johnny Walker's striding man. And just like the striding man, the bowing man was featured in many I.W. Harper ads. It's also now prominently featured on the bottle that we'll be reviewing today. So let's get in some of the deets. That's what the cool kids are saying, right? The deets. The company is, as I've mentioned, is Diageo. The distillery, well, it's sourced from Kentucky. I don't know. I did a lot of digging. I cannot figure out where the distillate comes from. And it's bottled in Tennessee. So the liquid that we're going to be tasting today is I.W. Harper Straight Bourbon finished in Cabernet Sauvignon casks. Yeah, Sauvignon. So I'm drinking today from the Blind Tasting Podcast Etched Rocks Glass. I like the way a rocks glass feels in the hand. And so rather than a Glencairn today, I'm going to go this route because, well, it's my podcast. So I'm going to pour some of this fancy looking stuff into my glass. I'm just going to have a splash for this tasting today. And remember, kids, drink how you like. Of course, I always drink mine neat, but there's no judgy about that. Believe it or not, even Pappy Van Winkle drank his bourbon with ice and a splash of lemon, so you do you. So it comes in at 90 proof. It's aged for 4 years in new charred American oak barrels. And then it's finished in what they call luxury California Cabernet Sauvignon casks. And you can tell French is my second language, so Sauvignon. Now, I paid 55 doll hairs at a grocery store here in town for this bottle, but I've seen it for a bit more, and I've seen it for just a bit less than that. But that's generally what you're going to find it for. Now, I always like to talk about the bottle design. I think I'm fascinated by that for some reason. And this one's kind of hard to describe. It is super fancy, and it's not like any other bottle I have in my collection. The stopper is heavy in the hand. It's solid. I'd call it sturdy. It's not like some corks that break off on you. This one is a superb quality. The bottle is kind of a beveled, short, rectangular bottle. And it's really got a high-end look to it. The name I.W. Harper is embossed in very large glass letters on the side of the bottle, which adds a cool factor. And there he is. You see the bowing man I mentioned before right on the front, and it's inside their iconic diamond logo. Now, the fine folks at Diageo say it makes the brand look not only welcoming, but also sophisticated, elegant, and high quality. I'm not sure I'm going to agree with that statement entirely upon drinking it, but we'll find out soon enough. So the mash bill is undisclosed, and that always makes me a bit wary when you have to dig and dig for info on a whiskey, and then you come up empty-handed. It seems like they should be a little more transparent about things like mash bill, but who the hell am I, right? The color. In the glass, it's kind of an amber yellow. It's about the best I can do on that. If you're looking at the magical color scale, it's about a 0.7. Now, don't be fooled by looking at the liquid in the bottle. If you hold up the bottle and you look at it, it looks a lot darker. It looks closer to a pink color, and it appears much darker than in your glass, and that's just FYI. I always say this here, so here I go again. To me, how a whiskey looks in your glass can really tell you about the extent of the flavors you're about to put in your mouth. The darker the hue, the deeper the flavor profile. And not always, but in a lot of cases. So it is worth mentioning, and so I do. Okay, I'm going to get into it, and I'm going to nose it a little bit. And I'm getting vanilla and caramel, just your typical notes up front. Maybe a little bit of fruit. Maybe a little dark fruit of some kind. Very faint. It might be because of the wine cask finishing that I'm getting that dark fruit. There's a little bit of mintiness to it, which is very interesting. and just the faintest amount of oak. Let me go ahead and take a sip of this and move it around a bit. And let it roll off the tongue. That cask finishing is really coming through here. It's very sweet, very pleasant. I'm getting those hints of vanilla. Quite a bit of pepper. And that dark fruit is coming through strong now. I really think that has a lot to do with the finishing. It's very pleasant, though. Let me get another sip. So the good folks at I.W. Harper say the finish is smooth and smoky with a taste of rich oak and vanilla out front, a hint of dark fruit on the backbeat, followed by a clean and smooth finish. Well, what do I think? I think the finish is kind of a fleeting finish. It comes and goes real fast. Now, that stone fruit lingers, and you do get that slight oakiness, but I'm not getting rich vanilla. Just a minimal amount of flavors. Now, don't get me wrong. They do seem to go well together, but there's nothing to jump up and down over. So, overall, it's super easy to drink, especially if you're new to bourbon or you're a big fan of wine. I think it'd be really easy to finish off this whole bottle in one sitting. It really is good. Be careful with this one. It's only 4 years old, so the depth of flavors isn't amazing, but that's kind of to be expected. The finishing fills in some of those gaps, in my opinion. So what's my verdict? I'll be right back after the money spot to reveal today's verdict. Are you looking to update your bar or man cave with some great photographs or wall art? Head over to famousdocs.etsy.com and pick up some fantastic prohibition, whiskey, and gangster-related photographs and art. And if you purchase 4 or more items, you'll get 20% off your entire order for a limited time. That's famousdocs.etsy.com. famousdocs.etsy.com. So remember, there are 3 options at the Blind Tasting Podcast for the verdict. Are we going to keep it, collect it, or cull it? And now to keep it means to proudly display it in your liquor cabinet or bar. This stuff is good for a pour any time, so there's no need to stock up since it's always available. Now, to collect it means to grab another bottle or maybe 2 since you find it so delicious, or since it may not be easy to get a hold of. Our last possible verdict is to cull it. Pass it on to an annoying neighbor, or use it to preserve specimens in your laboratory. In the case of I.W. Harper Cabernet Cask Reserve, I say, keep it. Absolutely. It's pleasant. It's got gentle, subtle flavors. It's a super fun bottle that'll impress all your friends. And honestly, it looks like a $90 bottle, so there's that. At $55, and it drinks so easy. And if you know a newbie or somebody that just loves wine, this would be perfect for them. I think it's above average, but it's not really a go-to for me. But like I said, wine drinkers are going to absolutely love this one. Go out and grab a bottle of I.W. Harper. Have it around the house in case one of your buddies comes over and want to give it a try. I highly recommend it. Now, I know I say this every time, but I really do mean it, kids. Let's give a shout out to the farmers, the distillery production guys and gals, and the warehouse workers, the bottlers and the truck drivers. They're the ones that make it happen. So cheers to all of them. Well, that's all I got for today, Whiskey Freaks. Thanks for listening to the Blind Tasting Podcast, your #1 attitudinal bourbon destination.